And here we go, everybody. Get ready for a podcast because it's about to start. Boom, boom, boom. And we're counting now. We're counting down. Boom. It's a detonation. Everybody. Here, let's hit the play button. Let's take that off screen. Let's hide that. Take that down. Go and we're starting here. Hey, everybody. Star Trek DS9 Season 1, Episode 7, Dax is over and has been since February 14th, 1993, Valentine's Day. What a love affair it was. We are just getting started here on Live Long on Podcast. I'm Dave Mater, joined with my brother Jeff Mater, coming at you with Star Trek TV and movie reviews. And we're talking Deep Space Nine tonight here live on Facebook at Live Long on Podcast. You may also be watching us on our YouTube channel, or can listen on the audio version. Welcome to everybody. Jeff, we're going to talk about Dax tonight, the title episode and the first feature episode that had Terry Farrell's character and the Dax character really featured. As we've been talking about, she hasn't had a lot to do yet this season of Deep Space Nine, outside of the pilot, perhaps, where she this is about as much as she had to do since then. So excited to talk to you tonight about Dax. What are you saying?
Well, it's a fun episode. It's kind of like this murder mystery episode, but it's also like a Law and Order episode. It feels like Odo's doing like the cop stuff, and Cisco and Kira are kind of like the lawyers. It starts off with this like very strange, like almost like kidnapping that they're trying to do to Dax.
Well, no, you forgot about the date. There's a creepy date here. I don't know if it's a date. I don't know if they're I don't know if they were sitting together already. Dax and Bashir is who I'm referring to
at the very beginning, yes.
But it seems like they're at least having lunch together, and there might be some potential sexual harassment or some. But she's kind of like Julian, whatever. She's kind of blowing him off all the time. This is another such example. But he's like, oh, hey, I'll walk you home, walk you back to your quarters. And turns out this is the time she should have said yes, but that's neither here nor there, because she says that won't be necessary, and Bashir says, well, that's not a definite no, and goes after her. And it's in this exchange that she's encountered by our antagonists of this episode, the Clystrons, or whatever, the son of the murder, the person who was murdered, the person that was betrayed here. But at the beginning, we don't know what's going on at all. This is just, it's a kidnapping. These are malevolent aliens who are taking one of our Starfleet crew, and we got to stop them.
Yeah.
And Bashir's away for this. Or sorry, not Bashir, O'Brien. I'm sorry. O'Brien is not present. He's gone back with Keiko to Earth for her mother's 100th birthday. They mentioned that in the captain's log.
Okay. But my favorite part was kind of in this whole exchange of the fighting going on is when Bashir gets beat up by a girl and he realizes it's a girl, and then he kind of has like a traction in his eye, and the girl just pounds him to the ground and knocks him out. This might be my favorite.
She's an elite commando, I guess, from her planet, right? And
it's just the horn dog look on Bashir's face. He's like,
like it might be a potential date. Like he's like, oh, yeah. Hello. Like, is that how you read that?
That's how I take his look. If you go back and watch,
why not bring it in here?
It could just be like he's surprised that it's a girl, but
let's find it. I thought that's how I read that moment. Just a surprise that he was fighting a woman, and
yes, it's very much.
So
like
he hits Buddy here.
Those are the Coles notes. I'm more.
And this is where his little scuffle with the woman.
See, and then right there.
Yeah, it's like, well, he doesn't. He's a little bit caught off guard, I think, is how I read that.
Yes, that's how he's playing it. But Bashir is such a horn dog in the first 6 episodes of this series that I don't know. Maybe it's just what I thought right away. He was like, "Oh, I can't hit a girl. I'm hitting all these girls all the time."
Yeah, well, you can see like that malevolence, right? When he grabs her there, like by the chin, and he pulls him off, and then we get, Bashir's out for the count here on the ground, and we go to our credits. That's our cold open. That's quite the shocking moment there. But here, we'll just pause on that moment for a second. Yeah, like it's exciting. I think that the beginning of this episode has a lot of movement to it, which it kind of really needs, because by the end, this is really just a courtroom drama. This is kind of Law and Order. There's kind of the action in the beginning, like the cops here, these bounty hunters that pick up Dax, that turns into this, they call it a hearing, but it really feels like a trial.
It's very much like a trial. They got a gavel, they got a judge, they got two different sets of lawyers. They have pretty much an extradition going on, which is the whole idea of this is kind of silly, like that, like, oh, it's not Starfleet, but Starfleet's going to argue for Dax, but it's really Bajoran station, so Bajoran lady has to come in to be the judge. And just the whole thing is kind of like, well, okay, so it is kind of like, I feel like this episode is a critique on the criminal justice system, but it's also for me kind of a critique on, like, Dax represents kind of like a schizophrenic, kind of like A Beautiful Mind dealt with too. Like, um, are you responsible for the decisions that, like, your other personality made? Or it's also like a DID, kind of like Mr. Robot or Split, where you have different personalities built within you. Now, the Trill is a little bit different, but that's kind of the best comparison I can make. What do you think?
Well, pretty much like the Trill were only introduced in one Next Generation episode prior to the Deep Space Nine series. That was a character that the Trill had a very different look in that episode. Commander Riker comes to have the symbiote in him for a while, right? And it's during that part that the love affair between Crusher and the host, the previous host, continues through Riker. And the way that the Trill were presented previously in that episode was that the symbiote just takes over. The symbiote is like basically in the pilot seat. But this was kind of a reimagining of the Trill lore in this episode too. Everything that we kind of a lot of things that we come to accept about the Trill and who they are and whatnot, and Dax as well and her character come to be established in this episode. So it's an important one.
I still feel like that is the case, that the symbiote is in the driver's seat, but the host is still like the basic, operating system. Do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah. Well, they established this as being like a blending in this episode. Like, this is a blending of the personalities, that there's not one dominating the other, that they sort of become a meshing. But one personality is 300 years old and one is significantly younger. And I got to mention that has a certain effect. Like, the older the symbiote gets, the more I would think that the symbiote would have a dominance on the hosts.
Yeah, you're probably right, and that's probably why Dax seems so more of a thing than Jadzia does. Like,
right?
Do we even meet Jadzia's like parents in this whole series?
Never. Actually, they did that with Ezri, who's the host that comes after this, and no, they never established much about Jadzier's family, or outside of what she tells us in this episode about herself, that she went through this rigorous initiate program to become a host, which
right.
It's kind of like winning. It's kind of like being an Olympic athlete, I guess, or sort of like being one of the most exceptional people on your planet.
To probably get smart, fit, all the best, the best of the best. Like, the person that went to Harvard but was also an athlete.
Right. Yeah, it's you have to be sort of an exceptional person like that to be chosen for this. And we get to know a little bit about Dax, because Terry Farrell, as we've talked about in the last few episodes, was not an actor much before this show, right? Was more of a model, and got kind of like learned how to act in this role. And by the end of the show, season 6 is when she departs, Terry Farrell, like, she's exceptionally strong in the role. But early on, like, she doesn't have a lot to do. Even in this episode, she's very, I don't know if they wrote that into the episode, that she was going to be sort of like, her lips were sealed, she wouldn't say anything, because she doesn't have a lot of acting to do in this episode. But the few scenes that she does have, she really shines in.
I feel like she's a good actress right from the start. I don't think I feel like she's much better than the lady that plays Troy, Marina Satiris. She's a much better actress than her, in my opinion.
You say that they're the respective eye candies of their cast?
Absolutely, they definitely are. With Voyager, I mean, the eye candies, the probably 7 and 9, and she might be the best actress of those three. Jerry Ryan, but Terry Farrell's good. I mean, you never cringe at her. I believe her Dax character. She plays it well. She made it her own. I like Ezri too, though. Like, I have no problem with either of them.
Well, early on, like, I think she plays it kind of mysterious, and I think it really does work, because as she gets more comfortable being on this show, Terry Farrell, I think also that Dax character becomes more alive, right? And we're to understand that Dax was only joined about 2 years before this episode, right? Like Jadzia and the Dax symbiote.
Okay. They show it in the first episode, I thought.
It's a flashback though.
Right. But they do show it. Yeah, I mean, it's not really important to the character for me. If
Just on how long she's been Dax. That's the only thing I gotta say, because we know that like when we met Ezri had been Dax for about 3 months.
Right. So, I mean, yeah, like I agree. The whole Dax character is fantastic. I really enjoy it. I love the whole the whole idea you can do with the character. I mean, it's great for a writer. I mean, she's 300 years old, so you can write tons and tons of backstory for her.
And they gave her like all this Klingon backstory and all these things that like Curzon had done and other hosts had done, and then they had that whole the murderous host that had been sort of erased from memory. Like that comes later, and we'll visit that episode when it comes. But like, there's a lot to go into. I especially like later on in the show when all of her friends get the different personalities, I guess, put into them.
Yeah, like
including Curzon.
Yeah, for sure. Like she, like I said, she's as a character, regardless of the actress, she's a writer's dream to write for. Just the Dax character in general. Really well thought out Star Trek character. I would argue a much better character than most of the characters on TNG.
Right. Well, some people consider it to be sort of a ripoff of like the Time Lords and Doctor Who, but I consider it to be distinctly different in the application.
It's more biologic. It's like a biology. She's like a biology, like kind of cool
like
thing.
In Doctor Who, when you like regenerate and get like a new life, you're still the same person. You just have a new like
look.
Well, you have a new personality. But you're not. It's not like this where you're joining a person who had parents, grew up, went to school, got degrees, and then became part of this. Versus like in Doctor Who, it's just like it's a new body, new personality, but there's no like backstory to that person.
And with Doctor Who, it's only about Doctor Who, though. Like, I mean, Jadzia is like not even like probably the third most important character on the show, but doesn't mean that she's not doesn't have great episodes. I mean, she definitely does,
and she's arguably one of the most important hosts in the Dax line.
Yeah, I guess you could say that too. I never thought about it that way. But like, I mean, I've never been a big Whovian, but until you said that, I never really thought it was like Doctor Who. But I guess it is. But
in some ways, it's similar.
In some ways, but it's different in other ways, which is not a complete ripoff. Which, if you're not stealing, you're not trying. So.
Yeah, it's taking that similar aspect of sort of like, you know, that was my past life and now I'm different, but I carry that baggage. Right. So in that way, it's similar.
It's kind of like if you got to be reincarnated into like a whatever, you know,
body. And you could remember all your lives.
That's what it is. It's kind of cool. It's definitely an interesting thing. Yeah, like. Who's not in there? Okay, obviously O'Brien's not in the episode.
Well, and I think also just the whole like their attempt here to stop the Claystrons, I think that's their name, right? The Claystronites or whatever, from abducting Bashir, or sorry, I keep saying Bashir. It's abducting Dax, right? They're at the beginning of the episode, and O'Brien's not there. So O'Brien's not there to fix the fact that they've sabotaged the tractor beam. Right, like they are getting through all the security fields. They're beating every part of the station, and they're getting through, and they can't figure out why. And then later it comes out that the Claystrons are actually allies with the Cardassians, which I want to get to that clip because I have to play. That's one of my favorite parts of this episode is actually Kira and her little moment.
Kira's really good in this episode. It might be one of my favorite Kira episodes.
Yeah, and it's not about her, but she plays a big role in it. And yeah, they're getting through all the security fields, but the fact that Sisko actually has a background, because before Sisko was a command officer, he was actually an engineer. So that he gets to kind of flex that muscle a little bit in this episode with O'Brien not there.
Yes, and he like I remember I was watching them do that, and I was like, that's not really normal like Sisko thing. He's doing all these diagnostics, and yeah, that makes sense that it's his backstory. But like in future, he's more of a command guy. He's not the one tapping the buttons almost ever.
Yes. So like, yeah, like later on, like when we meet Captain Layden, in all that Assignment Earth stuff, like that is where he establishes, like, when I met the young Cisco, the young ensign Cisco, which I guess was also around in the time of Dax and Curzon Dax, that he was more interested in like warp design and engine design than he was in command, and then he kind of brought him into command. But after the Borg attack, after the Saratoga was destroyed, Cisco was assigned to the Utopia Planitia fleet yards for 3 years.
How does he know Curzon?
How does he know Curzon? Well, Curzon was somehow was on a ship or a base that Cisco was also
He was not a Starfleet officer.
No, an ambassador or something.
Why is it so vague with this, with Kurt, like with his relation? I don't. They constantly mention this relationship. It's a thing that goes on throughout the whole show, that these two knew each other and this Curzon life, and they never really concretely explain who was Curzon, as far as like why did he know Cisco and why was he like this mentor to him, other than that he just was. They don't explain like how they met or like
just that he met him as a young, like out of the academy. Like the only thing I can conjecture from it, they don't explain it concretely, is that Curzon, I guess, was assigned to a ship or a base of some kind, and Cisco was assigned to guard him or attached to him for some reason. I don't know why. They both shared the same assignment, and they were in close proximity for a while, for a good time, a period of time, and that's all we really know. And they got it. They chased women, and they got into bar fights.
And he also mentions in this episode that he taught him everything he kind of knows about command. So why?
So I would have liked to have known Curzon a little bit more.
I wish, like I kind of wish season 1 had been Curzon, not as a and just
because later on when Odo joins with Curzon in that episode where that's the only time we really get a sense of who Curzon was, and Curzon doesn't seem like a guy who could also be this really noble ambassador and righteous, honorable captain, but he apparently was, like, or not captain, but some kind of leader that Cisco looked up to.
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to know what the hell he was, but they don't really. Maybe it was just a running joke amongst the writers that they were like, "We're never really going to explain this. It's going to drive people like me nuts."
Right. But so after they get that whole tractor beam fixed up, they're able to bring them in, and I just they kind of go back and forth. She won't talk about what it's about, but I just want to talk about this whole scene where, like, I don't understand why you didn't come to me with the extradition treaty from the beginning. Why you tried to kidnap her and you hacked our systems and you did all these things, and then I figured out you didn't think the Bajorans would go for it. And this whole part here where Kira's just like, yeah, you got your information for the Cardassians, which annoys us. Here,
this is the best Kira scene, and she's so good in it. And she's good in the next scene she does.
The Bajoran interests are even involved here.
How did you know your way around the station so well?
My conversation is with the commander.
No, your conversation is with my first officer now.
You Klystrons are allies of the Cardassians. Your knowledge of the station confirms that. They must have given you the layouts, which not only compromises Bajoran security, but also annoys us.
I'm afraid Bajoran interests are involved. And Bajor is adamant that, at least I believe it's adamant.
Oh, yes.
You see, there will have to be an extradition hearing before I can lawfully release Lieutenant Dax.
Right. And so, okay, and that, and I think that's a great Cisco Kira team up moment.
Yes.
I think Kira shines really strongly in that scene. And I think this whole episode does a lot to establish that these characters are starting to really care about each other, even only 8 episodes in, because I think they know that that's the formula they need to get to. They need to get this to be a family. And I think that they're throwing this particular conflict, like, hey, someone's trying to take our girl Dax off the station. We gotta help her. Even here, we get the next scene with Odo convincing Quark to let them use the bar. I don't know why the bar is the only place on the station that they can possibly have this hearing, because later on they have a hearing for Worf later on in the series, and that room seems like it was a good room to do it in.
They didn't have the set bill yet.
They haven't cleaned it up yet. I guess it wasn't ready to go.
Yeah.
Here. So, but I just think that here I'm just gonna.
Or they just wanted to get Quark in the episode somehow, and this was their way.
Well, I think it's also establishing that Quark would make this gesture too, because he's even thinking about it before. Like he says, no, I'm not going to do it just for Dax. So we established here that Quark does care more about his business. But then it was also like, and Quark's like, or Odo says to him, "I'm going to shut you down. I'm going to, I'll throw every little bylaw at you I can. I'll nickel and dime you until you're out of business." And so he blackmails Quark, which I think Quark respects. But I think it also showing that Quark is a team player in this community on DS9.
But you have to work for it.
You got to work for it. I think Odo approaches Quark in a way that Quark understands and respects.
The second time, the first time, he's like, "Get out of here." You know?
Yeah, because Odo tries tries the nice way and says, "Okay, I'll do it your way," and here, you're not going to have much of a choice,
right? Which that's how you earn Quark's respect. Is you have to, you got to try hard to get him to give up his money. You got to make him think, because he does care. You're right, but he's gonna choose money first, even though. But you got to make him care. Then he'll choose the right way. But yeah, so you're right. They're establishing these characters in a very concrete way, very early on. Which I feel like this episode's the first episode to kind of do that, build that family concept that every other episode so far has kind of been individual. Like the first one's all about Cisco, and then we got the Odo one, the Kiro one, but they haven't been they've all been kind of taken place on the station, so they have had a lot of interaction. But this one really kind of is like a meaty episode for it.
Yeah, we got a couple big not big, but some notable Next Generation alumni in this episode. We got the woman who plays the judge, the arbiter, the Bajoran arbiter. She was from that episode. Remember in TNG where it was like that guy, the Husnuk, who only his house was left on this planet that had been destroyed, and then he had destroyed all of them. She was the wife, the fake wife he had recreated. Mm-hmm. She's back, and also the woman who plays the wife of the general. That was Data's mother.
Is that
both very notable, famous.
I feel like is that
actors.
Ellen right or is it?
It's Anne Haney.
Anne Haney, yes. Okay, yes.
And who's the other? Oh, and Fiona Flanagan.
Right. Yeah, they're both, especially the one that was playing the wife of the general. I feel like she's been in a lot of different things, and maybe
she's been in a ton of stuff in her life. Yeah,
I feel like she's the old lady from Lost. That's like Daniel Faraday's mother.
She is.
It's Daniel Faraday. Same
her too. Yeah, she's been Fiona Flanagan's been in a lot of different things, and so sorry, I forgot her name already. Anne Haney.
Who's Anne Haney play?
The judge, the Bajoran,
the judge,
the 100-year-old judge. She actually died in 2001. I just was looking that up. Yeah. But rest in peace. But I think that this is a great. This episode has some big actors, and the guy who plays the son, Gregory Itzin, he was on 24 and stuff.
Yeah,
he was the president, right?
Yeah,
was Charles Logan.
He was the evil president. Yeah, Charles.
Evil president. Yeah, the vice president that becomes the evil president. Yeah. So he's in this episode. Like this, just a great cast on top of this a guest star cast.
This is like a movie cast. Like
it plays a lot like the Pelican Brief or
A Time to Kill. It actually plays a lot like A Time to Kill for me in this movie. Just the way
a John Grisham story of some kind.
Yeah, it's pretty much the could we do, I bet you they asked themselves in the writer's room, they're like, could we do like a John Grisham movie in like 40 minutes? And they were like, yeah, I think 41. Yeah, I think we could. And they do. They get it done. And it's a good episode for that. I mean, so that's what Star Trek does well. The Star Trek isn't boxed into one genre. That's what's so great about Star Trek. I mean,
I think you can have this great story that outside of like this little bit of action and mystery we get at the beginning, like it turns into a procedural courtroom drama with like a hearing, and it ends with like just a nice happy goodbye. It's like a stage play
for sure. Like, and at the time, I'm guessing Law and Order was airing, right? Like, when did Law and Order start? I feel like it was 91.
Well, Law and Order is like 90, so like Law and Order had been around for like 3 or 4 years at this point.
Right, it was in its heyday. Like everyone knew it was a big hit at that time.
Oh yeah.
and then so why wouldn't the writer? I mean, yes, I bet the writers were watching Law and Order. Especially I would be if I was a writer.
It was one of the biggest franchises going, so they're
Yeah.
like, why not do this? This is killing it. It still does. I still love shows like that. I think you can have stories like this that aren't just action and flashing and lens flares and blowing shit up for the sake of it.
Yeah, like I would take a Star Trek movie that was like this, and
this would make it that. Can you imagine? They would never do it. I
No.
could never imagine a movie like this, but it
Well,
would be ballsy, man. It would be
okay,
so
this
brave.
this is how they could do it though. Is the same way that they marketed this Joker movie, okay, with Joaquin Phoenix. Well, let's play with a comic book character and then just do them completely different. We're not going to do any stupid friggin' CGI or any explosions. It's going to be more like an art house movie. If they did that with Star Trek, it would be good. Now, how do they get the rights to do? I don't know how complicated all those things are, but what I do know is that they did that, like a Star Trek movie that was like a serious court drama or was like the Joker or was like an artsy movie, would do very well. Like I know Tarantino had asked about doing a Star Trek thing, right? Like set back in like with the Klingons, and was it Mirror Universe or I don't exactly remember, but I know Tarantino's been very interested.
Yeah, he's been taught. I think the big thing I've been hearing about Tarantino is he kind of wants to do some version of Yesterday's Enterprise.
Okay, yes. So that would be fun. I think now that Joker did so well and it made all that money, that I really feel like Joker is the movie that's going to change the whole way we look at
the blockbusters. Well, you also look at like a movie like Deadpool, another R-rated movie that did huge, right?
Yes.
Not that this episode is R-rated by any means.
R-rated. It just doesn't need to follow the beats of like a Transformers movie,
right, like a big tentpole movie. The thing is that I think right now what they're trying to figure out is, well, there's a ton of money to be made like internationally. Like you release these movies in different countries, and maybe their appetite for it right now in movies is more action driven, especially for American movies. And versus maybe the audience wants something different, or at least a portion of the American audience maybe wants that too, but maybe, and obviously we don't. We're looking for something maybe like they used to make.
Yeah, well,
they don't make them like they used to, Jeff.
Well, they could, and then when they go do that, they win Oscars and they win awards. So
right.
So why wouldn't
we make it look like crap and we make it look like 1981 New York? It makes $1 billion.
That movie costed almost nothing to make, and it probably didn't take very long to shoot it either, compared to what an Avengers movie takes to shoot. And now the Avengers, if you just look at pure profit, I'm sure the Avengers still made more money than Joker. But Joker, it's unheard of the amount of money that an art house movie, even about a comic book character, would make. So like if they did that with Star Trek, that's my point here is I feel like that's why Mandalorian is doing well. If they did that with Star Trek, where they made this art house rated, make it rated R, don't make it rated R, but make it cool. Like there's so many different genres, and this is what this episode for me kind of tells me is that Star Trek can be anything. It can be a court drama, it can be an action movie, it can be, for whatever reason they just always want to make the action movie part of Star Trek.
Well, that's totally true. I think that's completely accurate. Is that Star Trek can be anything, and it can even be Star Trek Discovery, and it can be whatever. It can be by anything. It can also be bad.
Absolutely. Or it could be repetitive. How many times do we need to watch Wrath of Khan? Wrath of Khan was good, but if you keep remaking Wrath of Khan, then it's not going to be very satisfying. What we want is a good story. That's
why I was ultimately frustrated with Enterprise, because eventually Enterprise just started recycling old TNG and Deep Space Nine and Voyager stories and just repackaging them on Enterprise. And I was like, these guys need to be shut down. They've kind of had the run.
That's kind of why a Star Trek show like this hasn't come back, because there hasn't been a new fresh set of writers that came out with all these new ideas, probably.
Because the guys who worked on those shows right from Next Generation all the way through to Enterprise, it was mostly the same costume designers and set designers and a lot of the same writers and creative people.
And you only have so many stories in your head.
They only have, eventually they just kind of ran out. They kind of fizzled out. Enterprise was the kind of even by Voyager was starting to wane a little bit. And that they kind of had their day, and then the audiences wanted something new and fresh. But I think you can kind of go back to that model like they had at that time, and with just a new creative team who kind of gets what it needs to be, which is anything but entertaining.
I think what people really like about especially the early Star Trek stuff, and Picard does it well, Sisko does it well. In this episode, it's a mystery. Okay, Star Trek does really well at mysteries, and what we get instead in the movies now are like them, like doing the whole Rafa Khan thing, or like where Benedict Cumberbatch is Khan, he admits it like, I don't know, 30 minutes into the movie. Like the mystery of the movie is botched, then it just becomes a generic action movie. What's fun about movies is like, figuring things out, and Star Trek, especially Star Trek, is figuring out like, and all the moral questions that you have about this trial, for instance. I mean, the fact, who did the murdering here? Was it Dax? What, I know no one did. No one did. Like, at least Dax didn't. But like,
well, it was the general himself who was the traitor,
right?
And then the rebels killed him.
Right, so he died anyway. But Dax was willing to take the fall for this murder just because he didn't want to admit that he had an affair with this woman.
And to preserve like this like hero. Dax was kind of like Batman in The Dark Knight. Right. Not the hero we need, but the hero, or not the hero we deserve, but the hero we need right now. Or is
it more, you either die the hero or you live long enough to become the villain?
Is that what Curzon did?
That's what Hartnett says. And maybe that's what Dax is doing. She's lived long enough now to become the villain. And that like I don't know, the whole thing with Curzon here is and Dax and Jadzia is, why is Jadzia willing to take the rap for something she didn't even do as Dax? To like it's kind of insane what she's doing. She's willing to die just to protect a secret that's really, I mean, kind of stupid. Like, I mean, like, it's not. Maybe I'm wrong. Do you think I'm wrong? Like, do you think it was?
No, I don't. I think it's. The point is especially relevant because Ezri later on says, "I'm not." She's very different from how Jadzia is, and
right.
in this way in particular, where Ezri is not bound by promises of her past hosts. That's partly because Ezri didn't go through the initiate program and whatever, and was just kind of a random trill that was joined with Dax. But it's also just shows that Jadzia Dax's values was that when she became joined, I think she's like, I'm taking on all that baggage of my the past lives I'm taking on with the symbiote, no matter what. That was the mentality Jadzia Dax went, or Jadzia, we never even find out what her name was before she was joined, but that Jadzia went in with when she was joined, and she carries that through.
Jadzia is not her name.
Her first name, Jadzia is her first name, but whatever her last name was,
right.
She drops it when you become joined.
Right. Okay. I mean, I really enjoy actually Bashir in this when he's on the stand there and he's being questioned. Like, I find he's really good at the repertoire. I feel like everybody shines in this episode. It's a very good episode for me. Like,
Odo has a ton to do too. We haven't really, like, Odo, other than Odo first, but he got the bar for the hearing, and then he goes off to this planet, which I guess is pretty close, pretty close nearby, and he's the one who does this all, and his like detective skills really show in this.
Yeah, he's doing the Jerry Orbach. He's like,
this is Law and Order. This is
literally like, I'm sure if I looked up the fun facts of this episode, I will, and I'll give them at the end of the episode here. But when I look at the fun facts, I'm guessing that this will be inspired by Law and Order, this episode. And it wouldn't surprise me because, like, you're right. Like, Odo is like doing all the cop stuff. Sisko is kind of like the lead attorney. He's the Hang'em High McCoy.
But he's a defense attorney instead.
Right. So he's not the Hang'em High. He's the Hang'em Low.
Yeah, that's Gregory Itzin. He's the Hang'em High McCoy.
Yeah, he's Hang'em High McCoy. But we don't like Hang'em High McCoy in this instance. We're on the side of the black defense attorney, which is ironic that this is pre O.J. Simpson. As well.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Like even when Sisko takes the stand to talk about his friend Curzon Dax, We see that Kira again gets to like be sort of, she becomes like this assistant defense attorney, and she comes up and does the cross examination and what. And she's really good in that.
Kira's very good in that scene, and so is the Bashir when he's on the stand, and he's really good. And
no slouches in this one.
Slouches. The dialogue's really well written, really tight. It's like they took their time with this episode. That's why I like it so much. I like when they, actually take their time and they don't.
It is a simple story. It's a simple story. A guy, other than the fact that it's got this science fiction angle with the Trill symbiote, like somebody protecting this old secret of a love affair to protect a memory and whatever. It's not overly complicated, but there's a great cast. It's a great story.
I think the part that's very interesting is the nature of the Dax symbiote, and like what Cisco is arguing throughout this whole episode is that, Curzon's one thing, and Jadzia is a whole other thing, and the other guys are going, well, that if it's that simple, then whenever you're about to die and you're going to go to the next body, you might as well kill as many people as you want, and then you're absolved. Which he does have a point there,
Right.
Like in some ways, if that happens and Trill did that, should they just let the symbiote die, or I think it's
you can't pull them apart, right? Was what the judge tries to do. Well, why don't we just send the symbiote back and we'll keep Jadzia here? And you can't do that. You would kill them.
No, I get that, but once do you put them in life in prison, and then once that person dies, the symbiote dies with it? Is that what you do?
Yes. If they died with,
you're killing two people or two things, two
entities. Yes.
Yes. If they would have killed Jadzia, both of them are innocent. But even if Dax was the guilty one, right? Even out of Curzon and Dax, which is never determined, because one, she's not guilty, but two, even if she was, it's never determined who actually makes the decision. It seems like both of them do. That's what they're arguing in this episode. But you're right. I feel like most of the time Dax is in the driver's seat. Dax, even if there's the scene that's right over your shoulder right now, where Cisco is pleading with Dax, you got to help me out so I can help you. You can't, you're gonna die for the secret of this affair that is ridiculous, basically, is what he's saying to her. And she's like, Benjamin, you don't know.
Well, I think they're also trying to keep the peace on this planet, which could affect many more people too, right?
And it's just everything with Dax is yes, he says she's a completely different person, but maybe Jadzia would not have called him Benjamin. Only Dax called him Benjamin because Curzon called him Benjamin, and so all these different things that are like you said, it's very interesting for me, the whole Trill character and alien. I wish they explored them even more, but they, I wish they explored them a little bit more than they explored the Bajorans. But I get the Bajorans are very important for the whole show, but I would have liked to see more of the Trill. But this episode, it's good. I enjoy it. It's a solid episode.
Let's get your rating on this one. Let's go full screen. Because we've been rating every episode. Our great time where we look at the spreadsheet. Jeff, I'm going to give this one a solid 9.
Yeah, I'll give it a 9 as well.
And that puts it at the best episode of Star Trek DS9 that we've watched so far.
It's a solid 9. It's a good episode. It's very watchable.
Well, we might have to revisit that one day once we watch some more episodes and say, is it really a 9? But I think that I'm confident with the 9 right now. So I'm gonna take that off. Okay. Let's put in, and this is a 7.2 on IMDb, which means that they don't even think this is even as good as Captive Pursuit, the one with the Tosk. But I think it's better. I think it's actually a lot better.
I think it's a much better episode than the one with the Tosk. I think. Maybe a Jody would disagree with us, but because he really likes that Tosk episode. But it's for me, it's okay. It's an okay episode. I get why some people like it, but I enjoy this episode much more. Okay, so quick fun facts with Jeff.
Yeah, fun facts with Jeff. Let's do it. I need a theme song.
I need a theme. Okay, so Ractigino, Klingon coffee, mentioned for the first time.
They explain what it is in this first time in this episode, because that's earlier on with Jadzia and Julian.
Right. In this episode, only Dax's quarters feature a replica of a fertility idol from Raiders of the Lost Ark. It can be seen briefly on the top shelf of her glass display case when Cisco goes to plead with her for information.
Okay.
So I guess they had a prop laying around. They put it in the back corner. The telepay for this episode was co-written by DC Fontana, who wrote such original series episode as Charlie X, The Side of Paradise, and Journey to Babel.
Well, yeah, I saw that. I forgot to mention that. Yeah, I saw her name in the credits at the beginning. I was like, DC Fontana was involved in this one, and maybe that's why it's such a good episode.
This was her only credit on DS9, and it was the last script Star Trek. It was the last Star Trek script she wrote.
Maybe that's why it's so good.
I think that's a big reason why it's so good. I remember seeing the name when it came up, and I was like, I know that name. And
she wrote some of the best stuff Star Trek ever did, including the best episode of the animated series.
She did a lot of TNG.
She was involved in TNG, but she was not. Yeah, she wrote quite a bit in the early seasons of TNG.
Right. Okay. The question of whether a joined trill inherits legal responsibility from previous symbiote/host companies is discussed, but ultimately not resolved. So it's not really resolved in.
Yeah, we don't quite get an answer on what.
Never makes a determination either. So
they don't ask. They bring in this trill expert, another joined trill as like a witness who doesn't know Dax or Jadzia.
Right.
And yeah, like they don't ask him that question. They don't go, "Are you?" Like they ask you, would you remember? And he says, "Yes, of course." But they're not saying if in Trill society they would hold you accountable or not.
Yeah, they never asked that question. Like this is my point back to earlier. I wish they had explored the Trill more.
But I got the impression that, well, okay, there's this whole thing with her past host Joran, right, who did the murder, and then that memory was erased and all of that. But I never understood. Like, was Dax responsible for that murder, or was it the fact that it was the Joran host? It seems like it was the host that caused Dax to be murderous, but Dax was still murderous when joined with Joran. So is Dax evil?
She just remembers being evil. That doesn't mean
then Jadzia is not accountable for the crimes of Curzon.
It's not of Curzon, it's of Dax.
Well, in this case, yes. But in this episode, we're talking about whether or not she's accountable for a crime allegedly committed by Curzon or not. But we had established that Curzon and the rest of them are not. Like everybody who came after Joran, which is, I guess, is only Curzon and Jadzia and Ezri. They weren't responsible. Because you remember that episode with Ezri where she's got like Joran in her head and Joran is kind of it does become integrated more into the Dax personality.
It would be interesting to see if any Trill have had a symbiote that have gone through multiple people and was like evil every time, was murderous throughout each host, and then that way you knew, okay, the symbiote is the murderous thing or whatever, right? And then if it doesn't, and it's only the host every 3 or 4 people or whatever is murderous, then you go, oh, okay, well then maybe it's not, the symbiote.
It's just it's kind of a roll of the dice. Like in Doctor Who, you have the Doctor, and then you have the other famous Time Lord is the Master. And so the Master goes through kind of varying degrees of evil, depending on which version we're talking about, with the female version being the most good.
Okay, other than Colmini, the other character that does not show up in this episode is Jake. So why is Jake not in this episode?
What's Jake going to do in this episode?
Dad, I want to go play with Nog.
Like Quark barely is in this episode, too.
You could have had him in the bar, I guess, with Nog, like really quick, but they didn't do it at all, which is fine. I mean, you don't need Jake every episode, that's for sure. Okay, so Fiona Flanagan also played Juliana in TNG Inheritance and Ambassador Villar in Star Trek Enterprise Fallen Hero. So you were right. And Haney previously appeared on Rashawn Uxbridge as Rashawn Uxbridge in TNG The Survivors.
That's right. Rashawn Uxbridge, yeah, that's right.
Richard Lineback Sellen played Romus in TNG Symbiosis.
And who's that?
Sellen? I'm guessing he was the guy that was the Trill.
Oh, he must have been the Trill, yeah.
Yeah. So Gregory Itzin has appeared in 5 episodes spanning 3 spin-off series of the Star Trek franchise. He played Ilon Tondro in DS9 Dax. He played Hane in DS9 Who Mourns for Morn. And he played Dr. Dysek in Voyager, Critical Care, Captain Sopek in Enterprise, Shadows of Pajem, and Admiral Black in Enterprise in Amir Darkly, Part 2. So he was in a lot of Star Trek. Okay.
Yeah, they brought back a lot of that. Was kind of also the genius of Star Trek in some ways, because you just put like a new makeup kit on them and say, oh, that's a new person. That's a new, so you can bring back a lot of the same actors depending on how much makeup you put on there. And sometimes it was just like, this is a person with a new nose. And
and it wasn't super serialized. I mean, the guy who plays Wandu, or what's his name? The Dominion guy.
Oh,
He plays like Jeffrey Combs.
Jerry
He
Combs, yeah.
he plays like so many different roles. Like he's in everything. Okay, so when Cisco is talking to Odo about the extradition hearing for Dax, Odo comments how the extradition hearing should take about 30 minutes. After this conversation, the remainder of the episode runs for almost exactly 30 minutes.
And you can see that the episode's just ended behind us in my backdrop.
Anne Haney plays a Bajoran arbiter presiding over Dax's extradition hearing and tasked to determine if Jadzia Das and Curzon Das are two different people. In Northern Exposure, Crime and Punishment, Anne Haney plays Judge Percy, who hears arguments that Chris Stevens should not be extradited because he is not the same person as he was in the past. So very
typecasting. That's typecasting.
They were like, you know what? She was good in Northern Exposure, so we'll throw her in this one. Okay, perfect.
She played that exact role in Northern Exposure, but
she's down the street. Hire. Do it.
Hire. She'll do it in her sleep.
Okay, so the image of the surface of Calistro 4 was a reuse of the map painting for Angel 1 from TNG Angel 1.
Yeah, it looked pretty familiar. I was like, I've seen this planet before somewhere.
Both Alexander Siddig and Gregory Itzin are also appeared in 24. This place takes place in 2369.
Not 24.
No, not 24. Among the items and costumes from this episode, which were sold off on an online auction, were the pants worn by Spice Williams Crosby, Collation Officer number 1. They're one of the generic guys that stands behind him.
Yeah, how much did those go for?
Oh, who knows? But
they sold. Somebody wanted them. I'll get these pants that guy, the generic Claystron guy number 2 wore. Tried to abduct Jadzia this episode.
Yeah, so
the other thing that stood out was that the judge, as played by I'll get it eventually, Anne Haney. She says she's 100 years old, right? But she doesn't look 100 years old. So this always said to me that the Bajorans, like not what a human woman you would expect would look like 100.
Or maybe just people in that era. Right, just people. In
maybe but I always took it that the Bajorans lived longer. That was kind of an indication of that they aged a little slower than humans.
Okay, I never thought about that, but yeah, you're probably right. Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, that's pretty much it. We got. Yeah, it was directed by David Carson.
Directed by what else did David Carson direct, Jeff?
A lot of Time for Murder, Coronation Street, Northern Exposure.
Northern Exposure crossovers, no bounds.
So that's probably why he picked her, or it just was a match made in heaven type thing. They've worked together before, right? And they love that. He's directed 4 different TNG episodes. So he directed The Enemy, Yesterday's Enterprise, Redemption 2. And the next phase.
Well, Tarantino wants your job. Sorry, buddy.
So it's funny that Yesterday's Enterprise came up 2 different times, almost by coincidence here.
Comes back full circle.
He also, so for DS9, he also directed Emissary, which we've already watched. He directed this one, obviously. Move Along Home and The Alternate.
Well, there you go.
He directed Star Trek Generations.
Star Trek Generations. All right, and what comes after this episode? Just want to see here because they usually don't have the same directors. 2 episodes. The Passenger is the next episode, and The Passenger. I do not remember this episode, so this will be an interesting one. Okay, I think we can wrap things up, Jeff.
Yep, we're good.
All right. Well, thanks for joining us, everybody. Star Trek DS9, Season 1, Episode 8, Dax is over, and we finished up here. Just want to thank everyone for joining us for this podcast, and we hope to have you back next week for The Passenger, an episode I don't remember and have no idea what's going on with it. So I'm looking at some screenshots. I vaguely know what this is. So that will be exciting to kind of revisit that. Make sure to subscribe. We need subscribers. Facebook, YouTube, all of them. Subscribe.
Do it if you don't. If you watch this for 2 seconds, just do it.
Yeah, just do it. Make an account, man. Subscribe, like, all those things, man. Help us out. Come on. Audio feed. You can get that through Anchor. So if you listen on iTunes or in your car or whatever, you can subscribe to us there and listen to the audio version. Check out our other channels. We got Super Mater Brothers podcasting. That's got more TV and films, not Star Trek related, like Westworld and Survivor and some other shows over there. We did a Tiger King one once upon a time over there. Feels like a long time ago. And here on Live Long and Podcast, we also Thursday we'll be back to talk about Star Trek, the original series, with our dad and Jody. We're doing Metamorphosis, which is the episode with Zephyr Cochrane, which is going to be a fun one, I think, to really talk about. And well, I think the dad should also have to watch Star Trek First Contact. Don't you think? Do you think we can get dad to do that, Jeff?
No.
No, I don't think so either.
Well, I could, but he'd be asking me questions throughout the whole movie.
I think he'd be squirming and complaining the whole time and saying, "This is not." But it's the Borg. He might like the fact that he is intrigued by the Borg.
Is that the one with the Borg DS9? I go, no.
Well, it is. In the first episode, it is. So if Dad put on that first episode of Deep Space Nine, he might think that Deep Space Nine is about the Borg.
He goes, "Who's the captain?" I go, "Captain Benjamin Sisko. He's the black captain." He goes, "Oh, I don't know that."
I don't know. Well, then he's got this whole world to discover. He can enjoy his retirement. Yeah, so we're talking that one, and then on Saturday we'll also be back to talk about what's the next Star Trek movie we're doing? Star Trek Nemesis.
Favorite.
Well, can't wait for that. We just did.
Yeah. Well,
Insurrection.
Nemesis isn't as bad as maybe Insurrection.
Yeah, and then we move on to the Chris Pine movies, which I'm kind of interested to really move on to after all these. So anyway, check out all those podcasts. Follow us. We appreciate everybody's support and commenting and all those things. And we'll see you pretty soon. All right. Have a good night, everybody. Bye.
Bye.